Alright, back again with another video for you guys, and this evening I have a really good versus slash comparison video. So tonight what I have for everyone is the Moto X PE Edition versus the Blu Vivo 5R. I apologize for that notification, y'all. So y'all already know how this works, but if you're new, what I pretty much do is I go through all the specs and features of the two phones, and I give y'all, in my opinion, which one wins in each category. And overall, at the end of the video, I suggest which one you should pick up based on price and performance. So without further ado, let's jump in. So the first thing I want to talk about with you guys is the overall build quality and design of both devices here. So let's start with the Blu Vivo 5R. Now, from a build quality and design standpoint, the Blu Vivo 5R is built and designed very well. There's no rattling or creaking of any kind, and it actually looks and feels very good in the hand, and it has a nice little noticeable weight to it, but it's also still very light at the same time. Now, the one downside that the Blu Vivo 5R, in my opinion, has in the build quality and design is the fact that it uses small capacitive non-backlit keys. Now, again, in my personal preference, I don't really have a preference over software keys or capacitive keys, but again, they could have at least made the capacitive keys bigger and backlit. As you can see, they got a ton of space right there, and to make them so tiny, it's really very hard to even show them on camera, and it's even harder to use them on a day-to-day basis, especially if you use your device at night to consume a lot of media with little to no light. So in that aspect, the build quality and design takes a little bit of a hit there. But other than that, overall, the overall build quality and design of this device is actually pretty good. Now, moving over to the Moto X PE Edition, again, you're going to hear more of the same. Overall, the build quality and design of this device is really good. There's no rattling or creaking of any kind, and it actually feels very good in the hand. It's got a nice weight to it, and it's got a subtle taper, and it's really good. Really good. And overall, I have to say that the build quality and design on this one is really good. And it's got a nice grippy texture on the back, which means that it's not really going to slip out of your hands, and that cold metal around the sides just feels really good. So again, overall, the build quality and design on this one is really good, and I'm liking that utilitarian functional design that Motorola, now Lenovo, went with when they constructed this. Nice little Motorola dimple, so you have somewhere to rest your hand. That's pretty cool. Pretty cool indeed. Alright, so that pretty much covers the build quality and design on both devices. Now, in my opinion, you guys, because I already know you guys are probably wondering, so who has the best build quality or design? Now, across the board, both of these devices are constructed very well. But if I had to go with one, I'd have to pick the Moto X PE Edition. Okay? And that's strictly because it just works. There's nothing that's out of place here. Okay? Whereas the one downside to this, as I've said, is those small capacitive non-backlit keys. Alright? So build quality and design, at least in my opinion, the Moto X PE Edition takes the W there. Now, up next, the next thing I want to talk about with you guys is the overall screen quality and the displays on these guys. Let's start with the Moto X PE Edition. Now, up front, dead center here, you have a 5.7-inch Quad HD display, and that's 1440 by 2560. And really, guys, putting the numbers aside, when it comes to day-to-day use, this really is a really good display, and I've had no issues with it. And you can see it actually gets really bright, So if you're using it outdoors or you need to, you're not going to have any problems. Me, myself, I tend to keep it right there on a daily basis, and really, I've had no issues with the display. Now, just so y'all can see, just so y'all can double check, right there again is 5.7 inches, and the resolution is 1440 by 2560, and it has a screen density of 515. So there you go, guys. Let that show up on camera real nice. But again, overall, in terms of display, it really is a solid display. And when it comes to day-to-day usage, I had no problems with it, and I continue to have no problems with it. Now, moving on, let's talk about the display on the Blu Vivo 5R. Now, up front, dead center on this one, you have a 5.5 inch 1080p IPS LCD display, and that has a screen density of 401. And again, in terms of displays, guys, this is a really, really good display. And again, I've had no issues using it on a day-to-day basis, and y'all can see it actually gets really, really bright as well. But when I'm using it on the daily, I tend to keep it right about right about there. It's kind of hard to use this with the camera in front of me. So that's generally what I tend to keep it on a daily basis. But again, in terms of regular usage, this is a really, really good display, and I've had no issues with it. Alright, so that being said, you guys may be wondering, well, who takes the W in the display department? And really, I'm going to have to call this a tie. And it really comes down to personal preference. Maybe you like the bigger display, maybe you like the quad HD display, but again, in my opinion, we're going to call it a tie. Because, you know, putting all the display sizes and display resolutions aside, y'all know I tell it how it is. A good display is a good display, whether it be quad HD, 1080p, 720p, hell, even a 480p standard definition display. If it's constructed right, can still be a good display. So putting all the numbers aside, you have two quality displays on both of these devices, so I'm going to have to call it a tie when it comes to the display department. Now next, let's talk about the hardware and software built into these devices. Let's start with the Blu Vivo 5R. Sorry, can't talk tonight. Now, in terms of hardware, you have 3 gigs of RAM and 32 gigs of onboard storage, and you have micro SD card expansion. You have a 3150 milliamp hour battery. You have a 13 megapixel camera on the rear that can record up to 1080p videos and 720p slow motion. You have a built-in fingerprint scanner, and guys, the fingerprint scanner on this one is really, really good. And again, you have some really, really solid build quality, and you have a very, very eye-catching design. On the front, you have a 5.5 inch 1080p IPS LCD display, again with a screen density of 401. You have an 8 megapixel front-facing camera, which is capable of capturing videos at 720p resolution, and the videos on the front and the rear cameras on this guy are really, really good. And then you have your receiver, your proximity sensors, and your capacitive keys. These small capacitive keys. Other internals and hardware. When it comes to the CPU, this guy is running a MediaTek processor, which is an MTK 6753 octa-core processor, clocked at 1.30 gigahertz. And in terms of the GPU, it has a Mali T720 GPU. Alright, now let's talk about the software on this guy. Now, in terms of software, this guy is running a very heavily skinned version of Marshmallow 6.0. Android 6.0 Marshmallow. Got my words backwards there. So as you can see, it is running Marshmallow. Now, when I say heavily skinned, you can see again, this is one of Blu's heavy skins here. So it's fully customized and you have a ton of features. Now, in the interest of speed, sorry about that notification, guys. In the interest of speed, I'm just going to talk about how I feel about the software and its performance. If you want a more in-depth look at the performance on either of these devices, sorry about that, can't really do anything about it, so we're just going to talk through it. If you want a more in-depth look at the software on both of these devices, please be sure to check out my full reviews, which will be linked down below. Man, booming tonight, just booming. But again, this is a heavily skinned version of Android 6.0 Marshmallow. Putting that aside, putting all the features and stuff aside, what really matters when we talk about the software is the overall user experience. And I gotta tell you guys that the user experience on this one is very fluid, quick, and snappy. Okay? That being said, I was able to get it to show that usual Android slowdown, and that usually happens when you have a ton of apps open in the background. But other than that, this guy runs really smoothly on a daily basis, and other than that tad bit of slowdown, I've really had no issues with it. Okay? Alright. Now talking about how I feel about the software, it's decent. Certain things that Blu did to it are a help. Now, moving the quick toggles from the top to the bottom, and these are fully customizable. So that kind of helps. It's a lot easier, in my opinion, to swipe up from the bottom than it is to swipe down from the top. Alright? So that works. And other things they did were good as well, like including off-screen gestures, and double tap to wake, and double tap to sleep. Now I have it turned off at the moment. But now the double tap to sleep only works on the lock screen. And that included fingerprint sensor, again, is very quick and works without an issue. So overall, I would have to say that the software on this one, although it's kind of quirky and certain things, in my opinion, didn't have to be changed, overall, I would have to say it's a very fluid and smooth software experience. Really, Blu needs to make up their mind. This is like their third iteration of their launcher, and man, they need to pick one and run with it. But overall, the software on this guy is pretty good. It's pretty good. Alright, now moving over to the Moto X Pure Edition, the big boy. Now, in terms of hardware, the Moto X Pure Edition, you're going to hear a lot of the same when it comes to this, with slight variations. Alright, in terms of hardware, on the Moto X Pure Edition, we have, again, 3 gigs of RAM. Again, we have 16, well, not again. Where it differs, however, is we have 16 gigs of onboard storage. We also have micro SD card expansion on this guy. Yep. And on the front here, we have a 5.7-inch Quad HD display with a 5 megapixel front-facing camera, which is capable of shooting 1080p video and 720p slow motion. And we got that front-facing flash. We also have dual front-firing speakers and our sensors for our Moto display. Alright, other hardware things. We have a 21 megapixel camera on the back with LED flash, and the camera is capable of recording video up to 4K and 720p slow motion as well. Alright, good. Now, other things. Overall, I have to say again, the build quality on this one is really good. Now, as we move on, more internals. Internally, this guy is running a Snapdragon 808 processor. Now, that's an octa-core processor. And it's running an Adreno 418 GPU, which again is really good. Man, I got a lot of notifications coming through tonight. Now, moving on. When we talk about the software on this guy is pretty much running a straightforward vanilla experience of Android 6.0 Marshmallow with Motorola's custom tweaks to it. So you have your Motorola display, you got your